Naked bikes are one of the most popular categories of motorcycle, and 2021 looks to be a great year with plenty of new and updated models to choose from. So in today's video, we'll look at 12 of the best fresh offerings for this model year in price order ascending. The super popular Yamaha MT-07 is the entry point into the middleweight naked bike market, combining a simple yet effective spec with a lively parallel twin at a pretty unbeatable price. For 2021, there's been a visual rework with a new front end looking particularly modern and perhaps a little divisive. There's also LED lighting all round, a revised LCD dash, wider handlebars for better comfort, larger front discs for more stopping power, Michelin Row 5 tyres for more grip, and the engine has been cleaned up to meet Euro 5 emissions regulations. It's not a massive overhaul, but probably enough to keep the MT competitive, especially when you consider that its closest rivals have had even less substantial updates. The Revvy inline 4-powered Honda CB650R got a minor restyling, slightly improved forks, and a new angle to the LCD dash, which was previously hard to read in bright conditions. The Kawasaki Z650 just got some new paint jobs, although it was updated in 2020 with a TFT dash and phone connectivity. So perhaps the MT-07's most serious competitor is the new Triumph Trident 660, and there's no surprise that it made it onto this list as I recently bought one. It's now the most affordable bike in the Triumph range, starting at £7,195, and they were pretty explicit that they were going after the bikes we've just mentioned above. But Triumph reckon that their inline triple engine gives the Trident a unique advantage in the market, with a balance of low-end torque and top-end rush that makes it the perfect all-rounder. 80 horsepower peak is pretty competitive, as are the torque figures, and a wet weight of 189 kilograms makes for an easy bike to handle. Suspension and brakes are also well spec'd, but for me it's the finish and tech that set this bike apart from the competition. LED lighting all round, self-cancelling indicators, a proper good dash, and the option to upgrade to a Bluetooth connectivity module all combine for a riding experience that feels much more premium than the price would suggest. So far, I've been absolutely loving my time with it, and there'll be plenty more content to come, so make sure you subscribe if you're not already. That said, if you want a triple but with a bit more of a kick, then it's not that far up in price to the MT-07's bigger sibling, the MT-09. At 889cc and 117 horsepower, it's a big jump up from those smaller capacity bikes, but at £8,999, it's not a huge stretch on the wallet. The rest of the bike looks good value too, with some 2021 updates including a new frame, which is lighter and more rigid, lighter spin-forged wheels, a new radial master cylinder for the front brake, more torque from the engine produced lower down, and a massive overhaul to the electronics, including a new TFT dash and a suite of lean-sensitive rider aids that Yamaha say have trickled down from their R1M Superbike. The only sticking point could be the looks, with an even more divisive aesthetic than the MT-07. Personally, I think that people will get used to it, as with most challenging new designs, but let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. Off the back of the MT-09 update, a new SP version was also announced, with a dedicated SP paint job, an Öhlins rear shock and upgraded KYB forks, cruise control, and some premium finishing details. This one comes in at £10,199. Last year, KTM launched the 890 Ducar, which is their top-spec middleweight road bike, and I absolutely loved it. So much so that in a recent video, I said it was the best bike I'd personally been able to ride in all of 2020. The engine, suspension, brakes, tyres, riding position, and electronics were all second to none, and every time I rode it, I ended up with a massive grin on my face. At £10,649, it seemed like pretty good value to me, but if that's just out of budget, then you're in luck, because for 2021, KTM have announced the non-R version, which comes in $1,000 cheaper. Sure, there's a touch less power, it's a couple of kilos heavier, the fork is non-adjustable, and you don't get Brembo brakes, but honestly I reckon it's still more than enough bike for most of us on the road, and I can't wait to get my hands on one. Up another 50 squids from the Duke is Aprilia's Tuono 660, the semi-fared version of their RS660 sports bike, which was launched in 2020. It gets the same 270-degree parallel twin, albeit slightly down-tuned to 95 horsepower. That said, it has a lower final drive ratio, so it could well feel more sprightly at road speeds than the RS. It also has its own fork settings, and much wider, higher bars, but otherwise it's pretty much the same bike. The stunning bodywork is wrapped around an aluminium twin beam frame, adjustable suspension comes from KYB, brakes are from Brembo, and the electronics are pretty good as well, with a 6-axis IMU for lean sensitive rider aids, cornering headlights, and there's an up and down quick shifter too. It's certainly not the most powerful bike at this price point, but so far the reviews of the RS660 have been pretty spectacular, with many claiming that it's the ideal sports bike for the road, so I can't really see the Tuono being any different. Now, the Ducati Monster is one of the most iconic naked bikes ever built, but for 2021 it had a massive redesign with some brave changes that take it in a new direction. Every Monster that went before had used a steel trellis frame, which was a signature design feature and a huge part of its exotic yet accessible appeal. But Ducati have sought to shed some weight off the Monster to keep it competitive with the likes of the 890 Ducar, and as such they've ditched the heavy trellis in favour of using the engine for the majority of the bike's structure and bolting a front frame, subframe and swing arm to it like they do on their Panigale superbikes. Elsewhere there's been a bump in capacity and torque, a complete overhaul of the riding position, and the electronics package has been brought up to date with a 4.3-inch TFT dash, lean sensitive rider aids, and an up and down quick shifter. But the big story remains that they've managed to shed 14.5 kilograms off the dry weight, with a 4.5 kilogram saving coming from that frame change. Personally, I think it's worth it for a much sharper bike, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. It's from here on up that we start getting into the big power figures, starting with Honda's CB1000R, which puts out 143 horsepower at 10,500 RPM and 104 Nm of peak torque at 8,250. The 998cc inline-4 gets Euro 5 approval, but otherwise remains unchanged, as does the chassis, hardware and riding modes. That's by no means a bad thing. I borrowed last year's bike for a few weeks, and although it's not up there with the 200 horsepower nakeds, it's still more than fast enough for the road and has a nice cushy ride too. There are a couple of tweaks for 2021 though, including some slightly more modern and aggressive looking bodywork, 7-spoke cast wheels, a new TFT dash with phone connectivity, and my favourite, a new finish called the Black Edition. Yes, this version will cost you a bit more, but to me it's one of, if not the best looking bike on this list. I couldn't get an official price on the regular CB1000R yet, so I made an educated guess based upon the price of the last one and the 2021 Black Edition, which has been confirmed. In the same region, we've got BMW's S1000R, although it'll produce a good deal more power at 165 horses peak. Now that is the same as the last generation, but BMW claimed the new bike to be 5% quicker, owing to a 6.5 kilogram reduction in weight. Some of this has come from the new flex frame design carried over from their S1000RR sports bike, which puts more of the load on the engine. They also say that it's narrower, making it easier for the rider to maneuver themselves on the bike. And there's also the option to flip the bar clamp and/or fit a 10mm riser to dial in the most comfortable position. Tech updates are similar to what we've seen on the rest of this list, so a 6.5-inch TFT dash with phone connectivity, LED lighting with a cornering optional upgrade, improvements to the lean sensitive rider aids, and there's also engine drag torque control and hill start control as standard. It's all wrapped up in a new styling package that looks pretty good to me, especially in the sporty M package. You may have noticed that this list so far has been exclusively European and Japanese, but that's because we don't get many naked bikes from elsewhere. But Indian appear to be leaning into it with an update to their FTR lineup that moves away from its flat tracker roots and more towards a naked sports bike. Gone are the awkwardly sized tracker wheels in favour of regular 17 inches, which makes for a far better selection of road tyres. Suspension travel has been dropped a little, as has the seat height. The bars have been narrowed by 40mm, and a steeper rake angle sharpens up the handling, all of which should make for a better bike on tarmac. They've also taken the opportunity to smooth out the throttle response, as the previous version could be a little snatchy at town speeds, and they've introduced their rear cylinder deactivation system, which shuts down the cylinder under the seat at a standstill to stop you from toasting your balls. There are new paint schemes across the range, with the FTR Carbon still at the top, costing £15,599. With the carbon bodywork, Olin suspension, an Akropovich exhaust and the race replica paint job, it certainly makes for a special looking bike. Now we're getting to the sharp end with the brand new Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RS at 15 grand and now putting out a whopping 180 PS, which is a good 30 more than the previous generation. It's pretty rare to see a jump in power like that at the moment, with many manufacturers focusing on running cleaner for Euro 5, but Triumph increased the Speed Triple's capacity with a bigger bore, taking it from 1050cc to 1160, whilst at the same time they shortened the stroke to allow it to rev up higher. Combined with a 10 kilo reduction in weight, power to weight is up by 25%, which ought to make this thing insanely quick. The engine has been made more compact with a stacked gearbox and has been repositioned to bring weight forward and down, whilst the exhausts have also been moved from the tail section to down under the bike, again lowering the centre of mass. Suspension comes in the form of a top-notch Öhlins fork and shock, Brembo stylemas take care of braking, and Metzeler Racetech RR tyres are fitted as standard. The electronics package was already pretty advanced, with all of the lean-sensitive rider aids and modes you could need, but Triumph say there are tweaks and improvements to the algorithms, as well as a linked braking system and a new keyless fuel filler cap. A more aggressive visual design rounds things off for what looks like it'll be a spectacular bike to ride. Next up is the MV Agusta Brutale 800 RR, coming in at about 100 quid more than the Speed Triple. The 2021 version looks pretty similar to the last generation and puts out the same peak power of 140 horses owing to its high revving triple. The clutch is updated, as is the quick shifter, and the frame gets more rigidity from some new side plates. There's also a new linkage for the rear shock to improve comfort over distance, but the Marzocchi forks and sack shock, as well as the Brembo braking setup, all remain the same. So mechanically and aesthetically, it's similar to the previous year model, but the electronics get a massive update with a new TFT dash replacing an LCD unit and phone connectivity opening up navigation prompts and call handling. An inertial measurement unit has been introduced which feeds into the new lean sensitive rider aids and cornering headlight, and there's also cruise control, front wheel lift control and launch control all as standard. All of these changes also get applied to the Dragster range, which is based upon the same engine and frame but gets a more premium finish and tweaked geometry. Rounding off this list is another piece of Italian exotica coming in the form of Ducati's Street Fighter V4S with a new stealth black paint job. All of the specs are pretty much the same as last year, with a ridiculous peak power of 208 horses produced by its 1103cc V4 engine with the same chassis, equipment and electronics too. It is Euro 5 compliant though, and there's this new dark stealth paint job available for the S version, which makes an already mean looking bike look even meaner. And that rounds off a list of the best updates in the naked category for this year. There's also a styling tweak for Aprilia's Tuono V4, although full specs and pricing weren't available when I wrote this video, but let me know if there are any others I've missed in the comments below. I'd also love to hear which one you'd pick from the list if money were no object, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.